Good evening, and welcome back to our weekly series of studies in the Bible. First of all, thank you for joining, and remember to visit us at bnacademy.org. That's bnenoachacademy.org. And should you have any questions, please write us to askme@torahquestions.com. Now, I also ask you to please subscribe to our YouTube channel, B'nai Noach Academy, and we kind of update it almost on a daily basis. At the rate that we're going, we will be doing so very soon. And each day, a little insight, a little tidbit of knowledge, a little tidbit of wisdom that we're going to be sharing with you, our students, the public, our family. So this week's topic is about the sin of the generation of the flood, Noach's generation. What is it that they did? What was it that was so bad? It seemed that God just had it with them. And as God himself said, I've regretted that I created man. What is it that they did? What was so bad? What was it really? Was it everything they did? Was it anything that they did? Well, let's take a look inside. Let's look inside the verses and get an idea as to what exactly was their sin. So if you look, chapter 6, that's Genesis chapter 6, verse 11. Verse 11 and verse 12. What does it say? The earth was corrupt before Elohim, before God, and the earth was filled with violent crime. In Hebrew, that's Hamas, not to be confused with Hamas. I don't know if there's an association. That was just a joke. Well, not really a joke. There's some truth to that. But Hamas. Now, typically, and please bear this in mind, typically, Hamas means thievery, robbery. It's the type of crime when people are doing theft, when people are stealing from one another, typically money. Let's look at the next verse. Verse 12. God saw the earth, and behold, that it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted its way on the earth. So over here, it takes us a step further. Not only was it corrupt, not only was it full of felonious crimes, of violent crimes, that is, but the entire earth became, not only the entire earth became corrupt, but it says all flesh became violated. All flesh became corrupt. What kind of corruption do you suppose is associated with flesh, with something to do with the flesh? Well, that usually is the type of sins, the type of violations that are associated or connected with the body, namely all kinds of sexual violations. We're talking about adultery. We're talking about corruption in that area of behavior. What else, when God sees the land and it's corrupt, what else was there, one of the cardinal crimes that warranted such terrible punishment, or as we explained, such deep cleansing to cleanse the world from them and from all the sins? Well, the sages tell us that there were three main sins. As we said, the sin of adultery, the sin of idolatry. They were all idol worshipers. They all went away from God. And then the sin of homicide. They were, unfortunately, there was terrible, terrible homicide. They were killing each other. And I don't know if it was directly associated with them stealing from each other, but they were killing each other. And these three sins are considered to be the worst sins. In fact, just as to give you an illustration, you know, a Jew has 613 laws. And now what I'm going to describe now is specifically, exclusively for a Jew. I'm actually not fully certain as to how this would apply to a non-Jew. But just to illustrate how severe these three sins are, the law is any one of those 613 commandments for a Jew. Now remember, 613 commandments includes the do's and the don'ts, the positive commandments and the negative commandments, which obviously negative commandments is, like it says in the 10 commandments, not to kill, not to commit adultery, not to worship idols. The rule is that if, God forbid, someone has a gun put to their head, someone's life is threatened to, let's say, desecrate the Sabbath or eat non-kosher. The rule is, Ya'avor ve'al yaharek. They should actually make the transgression and not allow themselves to get killed. For that, you don't get killed. That's not the hill you die on. That is true with the exception of three sins. Those three cardinal sins. Those three unforgivable sins. Adultery, idolatry, and homicide. So if somebody puts a gun to someone's head and says, listen, shoot him or I'll shoot you, you have to allow yourself to be killed for that. Bow down to this idol or I'll shoot you. Commit adultery or I'll kill you. So I'm just trying to illustrate how severe these sins are in the eyes of God, how serious they are. And these are the three sins that they were most corrupt in. I'm sure that by association was everything else, but everything else is not as severe as this. Now, the truth is, it may very well be, I want you to listen to this carefully, it may very well be that not every single human being living at the time was directly involved engaged, that is, in actively committing these sins. But remember, from those 7 main Noahide laws, 7 commandments of the Noahide commandments, one of them is, which at the time they didn't have 7 yet, they had 6, right? I was going to get to later. But one of them is what? That you have to set up a judicial system. In other words, you cannot stand by idle when the people, especially an entire society, is committing all these sins. Someone has to bring them to justice. So by you not making the effort, not even doing anything, in order to try to bring some justice, in order to try to bring some kind of enforcement of God's law, you become guilty by association. So even if, which most likely there wasn't, but even if there was 1 or 2 or 3, individuals that didn't actively engage in these sins, but the mere fact that they were part of the society, part of the collective that was committing these sins, and they didn't do anything to stop it, they didn't voice any opposition whatsoever, they became guilty by association. So these are the 3 main sins. But remember, the Torah throws in that also the earth was filled with violent crime. And I said that violent crime is described as Hamas, right? As thievery, as stealing, that all the financial crimes. In fact, the sages tell us something very, very telling, very interesting, something very intriguing here. Number 1, this is what sealed the deal. Because if I ask you, it would seem, I want you to think for a moment, and I ask you the following question. Doesn't this pale in comparison? Namely, stealing. What's stealing? Shoplifting, taking a little here, a little there, right? Not killing anyone. Didn't take anyone's life. Money can always be made back. Didn't commit adultery, didn't violate someone. You didn't commit idolatry, you didn't violate that most fundamental connection that a human being has with God, the belief in God. So what's so bad? So they stole a little bit. Why even mention it here? Why isn't it even coming up as an issue? Because like I said, if they committed these 3 cardinal sins, I'm sure they did everything else in the book. Why is this being pointed out? Why is this being mentioned exclusively? The answer is all the other 3 are, in the most part, a sin that God, even God, so to speak, could tolerate to some degree. But when it came to stealing, when it came from the people and the way they stole, I'll explain in a moment, now God was, so to speak, not able to look the other way. This is what sealed the deal, and that's why it's being mentioned. Now, how did they steal? how it's the expression that the sages use, their fate was sealed because of this terrible sin of stealing from each other. How did they steal? What were their methods? What made it so bad? Okay, you had a couple of people that stole. Maybe sometimes a person steals because they're hungry, or because they have a temptation for an item that they don't have yet. Not that it justifies it, not that it makes it right, but sometimes the motive can help somewhat diminish a little bit the severity of this person's actions. What is it that they did here? So first of all, let's get a little perspective. Let's understand the life that they lived. Sometimes getting background, getting insight, getting a picture of the situation is not just merely fluff and extra, so to speak, superfluous information, but it helps us get an appreciation, helps us understand what really happened. And in this case, even more so. You see, even though the earth was cursed, when was the earth cursed? By Adam and Eve. And then later, with the sin of Cain, it was cursed. And certainly, the earth was no longer what it was in those first hours of creation, in the first day of creation, because remember, the first hours and then the Sabbath. Yes, granted, but the earth that they experienced, the environment, the universe they lived in, is not the world that we know today. Few examples. Today, nowadays, like it was the case in the last several thousand years, if one plants a tree, and once the tree is properly grown, you have to cultivate it a little bit. Well, for the most part, that tree keeps on reproducing year after year after year. Yeah, you have to irrigate it a little bit, but other than that, you don't have to replant the tree every year. That's inherently the quality of a tree. Versus grain, legumes and beans, vegetables, they have to be replanted year after year after year. And notice that the grains, the beans, the vegetables, they're more vital to our sustenance than fruits. You can live without fruits, but you can't live without basic sustenance. Correct? Food is, let's look at it in this sense, as more of a luxury item. Whereas grain, beans, the basic staples of food, this is the basic necessity of one's nutrition, especially before the flood. Before the flood, they were not allowed to slaughter living animals in order to consume them. So where do they get their protein from? Where do they get their nutrition from? Where do they get it from? From wheat, from grains, from beans, all the various nutritions that they need, all the various nutrients that they need. Now, in their time, you didn't have to replant year after year the wheat, the barley, the grain, the vegetables. It reproduced itself like trees do, 30, 40, 50 years. They didn't have to work hard. Compared to the way we work now, they did not have to work hard. Maybe compared to what was in the Garden of Eden on day one, this was considered bad. But everybody here is shaking their head and going, oh, it doesn't sound that bad, right? Imagine a farmer did the work once, and all you did year after year is you irrigated a little bit, or you're lucky enough and it rained. All you had to do is just come in and harvest and just reap the benefit of all of it. Everything was fantastic. This, you would think, you would suppose, would lead people to be more thankful of God, more nice to each other. There's abundance. Everybody is doing well. But instead, it led them to be more greedy, more selfish, and totally corrupt. And their greed went to such an extent that the way they stole from each other was in such a way that it brought no benefit to the person, to the thief who's stealing. It brought almost no benefit. And certainly, it was something that was a terrible loss and not even collectible for the victim from who it was stolen. The Talmud gives us an example. A guy was carrying a whole basket of beans. They would go and steal each. Imagine just hundreds of people who converged. What do they call it today? A mob, a flash mob, right? And just steal each one individually, one bean. Now, one bean may not even be prosecutable. Even if it is, certainly you're not going to go and sue thousands of people each for having stolen one bean. It's not even worth a penny. So what happens now? You can't collect it. You can't even prosecute it. No one's going to listen to you, right? No court is going to accept a case like this. Oh, he stole a bean. I caught him red-handed. And a bean? I mean, really? You're for real? But at the end of the day, your basket's empty. And the people who stole it, what use did they have from one individual bean or two individual beans? Could you cook it? Could you make a stew with it? No. So why were they stealing? It was almost for the sake of stealing. Remember what I said earlier? Not that motive makes it okay. Not that motive makes it righteous. Not that motive takes away the sin. But still, there's some sense. You know, if a guy steals a sandwich because he's starving, it's still wrong. God still says, do not steal. But every human being that has a heart could somewhat relate and even say, for example, I think if I experienced something like that, I would stop in and say, you know what? Let me pay for it. I'll pay for it for him. The guy looks like he's wearing rags. He's starving. He sneaked a sandwich. I'll pay for it. That'll be my charity for today. You know what I mean? Or for right now. I have some compassion. Maybe if I found out that he does it every day and he's obnoxious, okay. But at some level, there's some compassion for it. There's some understanding. But to steal for the sake of stealing with absolutely no benefit and certainly no need, why are you stealing? So it's almost an act of defiance against, it's actually an act of defiance. It's a statement of defiance against humanity and against God. It's almost like in your face. So in other words, it's done for the sake of cruelty. It's done for the sake of corruption. It was literally perpetrated just to anger the people and to anger God. That really brought up the ire of God. That's where God said, this is it. This seals the fate. This is worse than even idolatry, adultery, and even murder. Because what this does is, this brings in decay to the deepest level. To the deepest level. Typically, and again, this doesn't justify in any case, in any way, but typically, whenever, God forbid, there's a murder, what usually are the typical culprits? And in other words, in the investigative process, who do they go after? Usually they say it's either money related, right? Or love gone bad related, right? So they usually start looking at a business partner, at a spouse. Those are the typical things. If it's not that, then obviously it goes beyond that. Some crazy person that, again, it doesn't justify it. Please, that's not what I want to sound like I'm saying. But at least the person's a psychopath. They have a need, they have deviant needs or sexual needs, whatever their craziness is, or even worse, that's outright hatred. You have an anti-Semite, you have people who are, white supremacists and they shoot blacks or whatever it may be, right? But even in their minds, at least there's a reason, there's a motive. They think they're gaining something. Something is being accomplished, so to speak, in their mind. But whereas to steal just for the sake of committing the act of stealing. In other words, you're not gaining anything. You're not in any way filling a need that you may have, even if it's a deviant need. The only reason you're doing it is to corrupt, to decay to the deepest level, to the foundation, the whole idea of morality and ethics. In other words, totally and absolutely destroying humanity. That's why you brought the end. That's why it was the beginning of the end. Because it was a total and absolute corruption. Does that make sense? Now, when the verse says, if you look back in verse 12, it says, for all flesh had corrupted its way on the earth. What does it mean, all flesh had corrupted its way on the earth? Why is it emphasizing all flesh? It could have just said that they had corrupted their ways on the earth. Why is it saying all flesh? Well, remember, several verses from now, when God tells Noah how to enter the ark, who is to enter the ark? What are the instructions? Not everyone's coming in here. It's only going to be a selection from the human being, from the human race, the selection. The larger one relative to the other ones. You, your wife, your three sons, the three wives. That's it. And then from the animals, most of the animals, that is, the small exception, 2 of each, just male and female. Only 2. And those 2, you're not going to pick. They're going to come on their own. And only the ones that the ark will absorb, meaning only the ones that the ark will let in. The ark didn't need to have a metal detector or any, security devices. It was God security. It just resisted. Whatever the ark doesn't resist, that means they can come in. Whom did the ark resist? Why would the ark resist any animals? Why do you need a selection of animals? Well, the answer is right here. And here's a tremendous lesson for us. Here's what happened. Humanity, which is the pinnacle, the crest of all existence, became totally and absolutely corrupt. And as I just illustrated, in those 3 sins, at least there can be some sense, some motive. But in this ultimate sin that they did, which really shed light on all the other sins, the one of stealing, showed that they became so inherently corrupt that for no good reason, for no bad reason even, for no motive at all, they were just doing it. They were sinning for the sake of sinning. They became so corrupt, it had an influence. It had an effect on the rest of the world. All flesh had corrupted its way. And suddenly, animals were intermingling. Something that never happened, unprecedented. Animals were intermingling on their own. Now, we know that there are some animals that are mixed breeds, but those are brought upon by human beings. Much later in the Torah, we'll learn about it. It's really forbidden to be done, but once it's done, it's done. But in this case, when you have suddenly a lamb and a horse and a dog and a lion, it just, the whole world went in chaos. Birds, animals, wild animals, domesticated animals, the whole world became corrupt. And the only animals that were allowed in the ark were the ones that God knew were not corrupted. Can you imagine what that means? That from all species, only 2. The entire world became filth, became corrupted to the core. Now, why is this important to us? This is a very, very great lesson. Too many people, especially nowadays, have this notion, or I should say this argument of, listen, what I do in the privacy of my own home, what I do in my own private life is none of your business. Certainly, it's none of the business of people who don't even live in my country. Certainly, it's not the business of the animals roaming the world, right? The trees, the heaven, the earth, the sun, the moon. What's in your business? I'm doing what I'm doing. If I come out and do in public, I understand that you can take offense. I understand it's going to bother you. But why would it matter to you or to anyone else what I do in private, how I lead my life? What do we see over here? What the human being did affects the entire environment. this had a negative effect on all living beings. You see, because living beings don't naturally have that predisposition to go off the negative path. Most animals, you can look at them in a sense as robots. They are pre-programmed, right? To behave the way they behave, to have the character they have. The cow has the character of the cow, and the leopard has the character of a leopard. The lion has the character of a lion. And that's why, by the way, in God's book, is the leopard considered a murderer? That it devours weaker animals? Animals smaller than itself? Or the lion? No, that's their nature. That's what they're meant to do. Right? The big fish that swallows the small fish. Does the big fish go to for some kind of process of punishment for having done so? No, that's how God designed it, that's how it's supposed to eat. To us, it looks cruel. It seems so vicious and cruel, but that's its nature. But it doesn't do anything outside of its nature. And by the way, when it does, what is the rule that if an animal kills a human being, you have to kill that animal? That is really not inherently natural for an animal not to have a fear of a human being and kill it. Correct? So going back to it, the animals don't have this free choice. They don't have a mind of their own. They're not really susceptible and certainly not inclined to go off, any bad path. They kind of stay on the straight and out. More or less, they stay within a certain framework. A lamb behaves like a lamb, a goat behaves like a goat, a cow like a cow, an ox like an ox. Yeah, if you entice the ox and you get it wild, yeah, because that's part of its nature. When it sees red, it goes crazy. And you're going to start to tease it, it's going to go crazier, right? But if you don't do it, you leave it alone, it's just going to, eat, graze, eat, do the work it's supposed to do, and just, live a happy, merry life. Animals are not inherently ones to become corrupt. But because of the human being's behavior, because of the human being's actions, the animals became corrupt. That tells us how important we are in this universe. How important of a role we play in affecting the entire environment. Is the environment going to be a good environment? Are the animals going to behave the way animals are supposed to behave? Are the trees going to behave the way trees are supposed to behave? Is the grass going to behave the way grass is supposed to behave? Are the fish going to... That all depends on me. It depends on you. It depends on us. When we behave truly like a human being is supposed to behave, then we have that Selem Eloki, that image of God, and we're on top here. We're maintaining that. So everything under us also maintains its level of purity, its level of integrity. But if not, God forbid, we corrupt the whole world. So if a person says, it's none of your business, yes, it is my business. If you're sitting on a boat and you're making a hole under your seat, that's your seat. You paid for that seat. But you're going to bring down the whole boat. And that you don't have a right to do. That's my right to defend myself from ultimate death, from ultimate disaster. So you can't just say it's your business. No, it's not. So that kind of sums up, what happened. What was really the terrible effects of it. And I want to give you one more insight, and we'll finish with that. What I just described actually explains how the animals became corrupt in the area of relationships, in the area of sexuality, and so on. Actually, there's a great commentator on the Torah, a great Kabbalist, the Ramban, okay? Rabbi Moshe Nachmanides, not to be confused with Maimonides. He actually says that not only did the animals become corrupt, that they started to live, cohabitate with other species, but in fact, domesticated animals became carnivores. Domesticated animals began attacking other animals smaller than them and devouring and eating flesh. So can you imagine a cow eating flesh, a cow devouring another animal? That doesn't happen. That just doesn't happen. Even if a bull goes crazy and it kills, it just kills. It doesn't eat the other animal, right? That's not what it does. It doesn't tear the other animal apart to consume it. Here they did. So this tells us how our behavior, how our attitude towards right or wrong could affect the world. And this is a tremendous lesson for all of us.